Hello, everyone. My name's Liam Danaher. I'm an outreach counselor with the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation through the Gear Up program. And it's my pleasure today to talk to you about my favorite part of higher education, financial aid. Demystifying the financial aid part of higher ed is one of the most important steps to take. It's not that scary. You just have to take it in little bits. So there's some jargon in higher ed, and I'm going to unpack some of that jargon and demystify it. So for starters, I always tell students there are two train tracks in higher education you're on in the fall of your senior year. There's the application train track, the can I get into this school? And then there's also the financial aid train track, can I afford this school? The first and most important step in applying for financial aid is going to be filling out your FAFSA. Many folks have heard the term FAFSA, and lots of folks have some overwhelming feelings about it, but in reality, it's just an application that allows you to apply for financial aid from colleges, universities, state grant agencies like the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation. The FAFSA, like everything in higher ed, is an acronym. It stands for something. It stands for the free application for federal student aid. You're essentially applying for grants, scholarships, loans, and work study through the FAFSA. It's the first step in the financial aid process. It's the application that VSAC will use to assess your family's financial vitality in relation to the cost of college. It's the form that colleges and universities will use to assess your family's financial resources, and it's the form scholarship organizations are going to use as well. The application is free. It must be completed every year in order to apply for financial aid. And it commits students to nothing. I know oftentimes folks get a little overwhelmed thinking they've overcommitted themselves, but the FAFSA commits you to nothing except having the opportunity to receive federal and state financial aid. So if you're wondering, what do I do after I file the FAFSA is an application for federal student and institutional student aid. But one of the things you get when you fill out a FAFSA is a student aid report. It's going to come in your email like 3 or 4 days after you file your FAFSA, which should take about an hour to do. And it's going to be a little tax information and a little income information for you and a guardian. And it's going to essentially take all that information, run it through a formula, which you can learn more about in another presentation. And it's going to give you your expected family contribution, which is the primary building block for all financial aid. Expected family contribution, that's how much money you and your family are expected to contribute towards college expenses. The EFC is based on your FAFSA application and is a calculation set by the United States government. It's not the only amount an individual needs to contribute towards the cost of college, but it's a starting point from which colleges, universities, and organizations like VSAC begin to make financial offers to students. In the financial aid world, there are loans, which is money that needs to be paid back, scholarships, which generally come in need-based, so money based on your family's financial status, but also merit-based, so that which you've earned through your hard work and determination. And then there's my favorite part, which is the grant program, offered by our federal government and through the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation through the Vermont Grant Program. So there's state grant, federal grant, and there's also institutional grants. The reason that's my favorite type of financial aid is because it's money that students don't need to pay back. So it's what we would technically call gift financial aid, designed to sort of make higher ed more equitable and accessible for folks of all different resources. So grants are generally need-based. They're awarded by, like I said, the state government, generally VSAC, and the federal government, and then often institutions. Another thing to keep in mind is there are many pathways to prosperity in our great state. Some of those are going to be through institutions that grant 2- and 4-year degrees, but there are also many credentials of value available in the state of Vermont. Students have the opportunity to apply for grant-based financial aid through our Vermont Advancement Grant, which is specifically reserved for students who are not pursuing a degree but pursuing a certificate program. So if you're thinking education is going to play a role in your life, which it should, but that's not going to be at a 2- or a 4-year school, be sure to check out our website at vsac.org. You have the opportunity to apply for financial aid, and we're here for you just like we're here for every other student. So we already talked about the FAFSA, which is the application through which you apply for grants and work study. And we also need to talk about the role student loans can play, direct student loans play in the college financial aid process. So loans are generally a type of financial aid that get a bad rap. Lots of folks are kind of overwhelmed and intimidated by the prospect of borrowing money, and it's a good thing to be an informed consumer when you're thinking about borrowing money for college and investing in yourself and in your future earning potential. But what's specific about student loans is that it's money that needs to be paid back over time after a student leaves college or university. So again, the interest rate for federal student loans is set by the federal government every single year. Students apply yearly. Loan borrowing limits go up annually, beginning for most dependent students at $5,500 their first year, $6,500 their second year, $7,500 their third and fourth years. The loan limits go up as students get older, generally speaking, and hopefully students graduate in 4 years and they can keep their borrowed money as low as possible. So an important thing I like to tell students is that borrowing money is a tool. Loans are a tool. They're a tool that you get to build your college experience with, but it's really important to be mindful of how much money you're borrowing, what school is affordable for you, and keeping that number as low as is reasonable for you based on your family's resources, based on your career outlook and expectations, and based on your own personal debt threshold. There's no one formula, but it's important that individuals understand what it means to borrow money and what it means to pay that money back. Complementing loans, I very often have students say, oh, we're not going to qualify for X resource or Y resource. And what I always tell students is that one of the things you can control every single day in school is the type of merit-based financial aid that you're going to be eligible for as a prospective student. So one of the ways that scholarship organizations, colleges and universities, nonprofits like VSAC, one of the ways they communicate their support and for students is through merit-based financial aid. So merit means that which you have earned. You earn it through either getting good grades, community involvement, leadership, participation in a community of service, participation in a community of faith, maybe through a particular volunteer organization. It's that what you do with your spare time. It's that what you do with your grades. It's that what you do with your energy. So when students say, "Oh, I need scholarships," I always remind them that they have the absolute control over that. VSAC hosts a really robust scholarship program. Generally, every year around Valentine's Day is our scholarship deadline. Check our website for the specific date. But we host a scholarship program for close to, I would say, over 100 scholarships across the state of Vermont. And then there's also school-based scholarships, which you should talk to your school counselor about. There's going to be institutional scholarships at the institutions you're applying to. Some of them are automatic. Some of them you need to apply for. And there's also going to be random nonprofits in your town and region that are going to offer scholarships as well. So talking to your school counselor is going to be really key, and your outreach counselor if you have one. When it comes to financial aid, there are two key types of financial aid. We already talked about merit aid, which is that which you can earn, and then there's also need-based financial aid. For folks who come from maybe an economically marginalized background or families of modest income, need-based financial aid is going to be distributed by the United States federal government in the form of Pell Grants. It's going to be distributed by the institutions that students apply to through institutional grant and scholarship money, and it's also going to be available through local nonprofits and other organizations. Need-based financial aid is really designed to make higher education more equitable for all folks and can really help make an institution that might seem financially out of reach a more palatable and accessible dream for students. Something that occasionally happens to students that I get to work with is that they're going to have a combination of loans, grants, scholarships, and you're going to add all that money up at the end, and then you look at the overall cost of attendance at an institution, which is tuition, room, board, and fees. And sometimes those numbers line up, but sometimes there's a gap at the top. The gap at the top, I often tell folks, is the hardest or most challenging part to finesse of the higher ed financial aid game, because folks don't have access to the same resources across families. Some families are going to have access to resources that other families are not. Generally speaking, folks are going to fill that gap with past, present, or future income. The three types of money all of us ever have. Past income would be savings, present income would be current employment, and future income would be an extra loan. So we already talked about loans. That's money you pay back with interest over time. The less you borrow, the less you owe, and the faster you pay it back, the less you pay overall. The trick with, I would say, private loans is to know who you're doing business with and to know what the terms of any loan are going to be. what the interest rate is, what the repayment options are, if there are forgiveness options, what deferment and forbearance options there might be. Students are going to have the opportunity to borrow money from whomever they want to borrow from. And it's just important, like it is important to do your due diligence when you're buying a new car, when you're grocery shopping, when you're buying a home or renting a home. It's also important to know who you're doing business with when you're borrowing money for college. It's one of the biggest expenses many folks will ever make, and it's important to know what it means to borrow that money and what it means to pay that money back. Obviously, VSAC is a private lender, but folks can choose to sort of shop around and do their research and figure out where it makes most sense for their families. And last but certainly not least, on the FAFSA, one of the questions that the FAFSA is going to ask students is, are you interested in work study? Students, many students I've had the opportunity to work with know what it means to hold a job, and know what it means to work hard, and they know what it means to study hard. So work study is it's a combination of federal money and institutional money designed to give students working experience on campus in the form of financial aid. So you can apply for a work study position on your campus, and then when you get to campus in your first semester, there will generally be a job fair or a resource fair where you can get keyed in to a campus-based job. One of the most important nuances, and I always tell students this story, that I was not doing really well in my Spanish class, my first semester of college, and I had a work study job in the library. I needed to take off work so I could focus on Spanish, and my boss totally encouraged me because he recognized that I was a student first and an employee second. One of the great benefits of working on a campus job is you have a relationship with your school and with your boss, and it allows you to earn money to support yourself, to keep your debt low, to pay for your lifestyle, but also allows you to balance being a student and academic first. So it's just an important nuance to keep track of. I guess something that students mention to me often is that it can be confusing to understand how all the pieces of a college financial aid application and award letter come together. College is going to accept you through your application process, and they're also going to offer you money through an award letter. There's institutional money, state money, private money, and alternative financial resources that are going to all come together right around the fall of your freshman year of college to help you pay your bill and cover your gap. Nobody is going to be expected to cut a check for the full cost of attendance. So when you're searching for schools, don't be intimidated to look at schools that you might think are out of your price range. You never know until you apply for financial aid. And one important thing is if you don't fill out the FAFSA, you are telling the colleges that you'll cut a check for the full cost of attendance. So if you're sitting there thinking, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, or I don't know where I'm going to go, I don't know how to take the steps I've got to take, don't worry, you're in good company. Most folks have sat in that position too. At the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation, we are here for you to help you plot your way forward. One thing to keep in mind is that the most guaranteed way the most reliable way to access financial stability and occupational prosperity is to make room for education in your life. That's going to look different for you. It's going to look different for your friends. It's going to look different than it did for your parents or your grandparents. But one thing we all have in common is that education is an elevator. That education could be technical, trade, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, or beyond. But one thing we all have in common is that we need to make room for education in our lives, and that's something we believe in pretty strongly at the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation, and something we know to be true. So college is not out of reach. College is affordable. Training and opportunity is waiting. You just have to take the first step and apply.